A very good morning to all of you. I would start by thanking from the bottom of my heart the organizers of this conference for giving me this opportunity to be part of this conference. Uh, as the theme of today's panel goes, how does the world react to the tariffs, resilience or retreat? I think we need to appreciate this question a larger background and then zoom into what is happening in Asia. So very quickly to just give you an idea, we are going through what geopolitical observers are calling we're passing through a phase of geostrategic globalization where US and China are both deliberately overturning the core features of neoliberal globalization. So, for example, even before Trump came, Biden started with the small yards, high fence, where the fence meant that certain strategic sectors are encased from market forces within a yard. Now, Beijing and DC both remain connected to global networks, but the fight is all about how do each of them establish their centrality in the various networks wherever the geoeconomics and geopolitics intersect with each other. This has given rise to what scholars are calling the birth of a strategy state and in an era of geostrategic globalization. Now, this strategy state's emergence has led to a situation where inter-firm competition is something which is being determined by interstate outcomes of interstate competition. So different firms are reacting and responding to this crossfire between two powers, economic powerhouses today. Whereas certain set of firms across the globe are tiptoeing, aligning with the geopolitical objectives of their respective state so that they are in the good books. So for example, in the United States, the Intel is basically something which is increasingly aligning with whatever the US government is doing and withdrawing from its interests in other parts of the world, mainly China. Whereas someone like Apple is basically hedging and trying to see to it that its deep investments in this part of the world doesn't go waste, but at the same time it has no other option but to resort to a China plus one strategy, and they were trying to diversify itself to Vietnam and India. So obsession with national security and new conception of win-lose globalization where countries don't mind losing, but the only objective is the other should lose much more than me. So that is the kind of world we are in. And tariffs are obviously manifestations of all these developments that I just very briefly mentioned. One of the most interesting sectors which is witnessing a lot of impact of tariffs as a result of Trump's Liberation Day tariffs, that is, not only foreign auto firms within the United States are facing the heat, but even the local American players are facing the heat. So US firms like auto firms like GM, Ford, Stellantis, Tesla, all are getting impacted. So for example, Ford and GM, their shares price fell by 4.4 and 8.2% respectively post announcement of these tariffs. And it is being estimated that by the end of this year, every unit of car that is going to be bought by Americans, it will be causing $10,000 more than what it was last year in 2024. Now, half of vehicles in the United States is imported from the rest of the world, which are going to face tariffs. But interestingly, the rest that are being made in United States, 60% of the auto parts are imported from other parts of the world. And so therefore, Asian firms, Japanese auto players like Mazda and Subaru are definitely feeling the heat. So car makers from Asia, similarly, South Korean players and Japanese players in this sector find themselves at the center of a US trade policy. So the Asian car manufacturers in the US are in trouble. So for example, Hyundai and Toyota both have invested more than $21 billion and $18 billion respectively. But their nightmare is this, that as they are investing today and ready to reap the fruits 4 years, 5 years down the line, you don't know what is the administration going to be, notwithstanding the uncertainties of TACO, trunk always chickens out, as we know. So if they invest, they don't know what's going to happen. And if they are not going to invest, then they are going to be behind they will be chasing the whole game. So they'll be falling behind, in other words. Now, as far as Chinese players are concerned, being someone who follows China, they are also, pretty much, coming up with new ways of dealing with this situation. So Chinese firms are now being compelled to set shops in third countries, the so-called connector economies that can bridge hostile gaps that divide China from West. So these connector economies, especially in Southeast Asia, like Vietnam and Singapore, have become very important places whereby they can try to go outside the radar of the US so that they are able to continue. In fact, there are certain Chinese companies who are now getting headquartered in Singapore so that they can even go for an IPO and escape the wrath of American tariffs. So, so therefore, the connector economies are going to become increasingly important. Now, in April, when Xi Jinping did come to this part of the world, it was in fact his first overseas trip in 2025, and it was basically a statement to show what is China's clout in the region. So Trump's tariffs have enticed the smaller economies in the region, in ASEAN region, to offer concessions, and now they are being sandwiched between China and US. Since Southeast Asia is a key route to reach out to the US shores, as far as Chinese exports to US is concerned, this region is increasingly becoming important. So calls, Xi Jinping's calls to safeguard multilateral trade system and stable supply chains are all part of this. So according to Bloomberg, increasingly more exports are entering the US through Southeast Asia. So for example, in 2023, direct Chinese shipments to US decreased by 6.3%, where by 6.3% compared to compared to whatever was happening before the trade war. And 50% of this is being actually compensated by routing exports from Southeast Asian region to United States. In other words, in short, what I would like to conclude by saying is that although these tariffs are going to have a lot of impact in redrawing and reshaping the contours of global economic globalization and trade flows, what is going to be very, very critical is how the Asian economies are going to diversify their exports and their imports and try to isolate, if possible, United States and isolate from whatever the American government does. So therefore, Global South, the ASEAN region, and how China and India are going to respond to these tariffs and how they are able to diversify and help themselves getting least impacted by this American administration's policies, that is going to go a long way in determining the outcomes in the near future. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much once again.